I think it will surprise almost no one in this room that I am a bit of a Martha. People often ask me how I do everything that I do as a pastor of 3 churches, as a mother, as a wife. And actually, I do think that I am surrounded in these 3 churches where I serve by a bunch of other Marthas. Food and desserts were made for the Taizé services during Lent. Our Mr. Rogers themed service here was filled with casseroles. So much food at my installation service that I think just about everyone got a to-go box. And there are groups of women everywhere who gather together to make sure that these meals are ready for us when services end or before they begin. I think even some of our men could be considered Marthas. I intended to look at Jim in this moment, but he's not back there today. Shoveling our sidewalks and plowing our parking lots during winter, planting our flowers and making sure that the outsides of our church are beautiful for spring and summer. I don't know who did the wreaths, but I noticed them this morning. They were beautiful. There are so many things to do at church, and so many ways that we can stay busy here. And typically when we talk about this story, we dwell on this idea that we shouldn't be Marthas and instead should be Marys. And so I'll tell you, I am a bit of a Mary as well. Especially when I'm home with my family in Missouri. My mom and sister might identify more as Marthas than even I do. At least they are definitely more type A than I am. And so sometimes I just have to sit back, be present with my husband and my dad and my nephews or other extended family, because no one needs that many Samson women in the kitchen at one time. And this is the tension that we live in. Because in a lot of ways, we are all Marthas sometimes and Marys at other times. And sometimes we are both in the same day. We are torn between work and rest. And we're asked to serve, but we're also tired. So I'm going to tell a little different story today. I'm not going to say that we should be Marys instead of Marthas. I'm going to challenge us to think about the way both women are faithful to Christ and the postures it takes for us to be truly present with God, whether we are still or moving. And that starts with this one sentence. Jesus loved Mary and Martha the same. It's not a story about choosing sides. It's one that asks us to pay attention to what truly matters. It's a story about learning to live faithfully in the tension between being busy and present. Martha is a faithful servant of Christ in the Bible. She welcomes Jesus into her home, and for us, it's easy to hear that as just good hospitality because we are a church filled with people who know good hospitality. But think about what's actually happening. She is preparing a meal for the Son of God. She is serving the Word made flesh. She's caring not just for any guest as they walk through her door. She is serving Christ himself. Her work matters, and in its own way is an act of devotion. But somewhere along the way, in the busyness of the day, the presence of Christ in her home becomes secondary to the work that she is doing for him. And that is a danger that happens to all of us. Even in our service to Christ, we can slowly be pulled away from attention to Christ. Now, her work is necessary. But let me say this, even when we're doing real and necessary work, loving acts of devotion, we get tired. And Martha is tired. She asks Jesus. No, she implores Jesus to have her sister help. Lord, do you not care? That's the question of an exhausted woman. One who feels alone and unseen and burdened by her work. And when you feel that way, you often appear to others as distracted or pulled in too many directions. Because so many of us carry a lot of responsibility. We care for our parents, or our children, or grandchildren, or maybe all of the above. We care for spouses, employees, co-workers, and beyond. We are the sounding board for our friends or loved ones when they are frustrated. And carrying all that responsibility is how we show our love. It's how we show people we are Christians. It happens at home and at church and at work, and happens in a way that can make our faith sometimes feel exhausting. And that is where we meet Martha in this passage. Martha's problem isn't that she's serving. That's okay. It's that her serving has become heavy instead of life-giving. And then in the same passage, we meet Mary, sitting at the feet of Jesus like a disciple. And she recognizes something in that moment, that for her, being near Christ, listening to Christ, receiving from Christ, is not a waste of her time. It's the heart of discipleship. She steps out of the roles that would be expected of her, certainly in biblical times, by men in the community, by the other disciples, even by her sister, who wants her to be helping in the kitchen. Exasperated, Martha says, "Do you not care, Lord?" And then Jesus answers her, not by fixing the situation, not by telling Mary to get up and help, but by naming what's happening in Martha. Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things. That's not a critique of her service, of her cooking, a dismissal of her hospitality. It's the naming of her heart, of what's happening in her inner world. And then he says something that should make us pause. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part. If we're honest, that's the part of this story we don't like very much, because it raises a hard question for us. It certainly does for me. What if some of the things we feel responsible for, what if some of the things that we call necessary are not actually the thing that is needed? And just like Martha invited Jesus into her home, and in response to her own invitation cared for Jesus throughout her actions, Mary has done the same thing. They share this house together. Mary shows us sometimes faithfulness looks like stopping long enough to receive what Christ is giving. So even if we are Marthas and Marys in the same day, we can respond to Jesus faithfully. We can serve Jesus and can be still to hear and receive Christ. And I think we can learn a lot about our own ways of being from how Christ responds to both women. With Martha, he doesn't reject her. Thank you. He calls her by name. He responds gently and names what's happening within her, and names her anxiety over her need to serve everyone, I certainly can relate to that. The issue he has isn't with her activities, like we said. And he's not trying to pit activity versus stillness, but instead he's focused on distraction. Because Jesus knows you can be busy and still attentive. And you can be still and distracted. Now this week, I was at a learning session, we'll say, with a bunch of other pastors. And one of them said that in his first call, his coworkers said, or his session said, we don't know what you do all day. What is it that you do? And so he started making a log. And he wrote down every single thing that he did, every phone call he made, every visit he made, every prayer that he wrote, every moment that he stopped for a moment to read for learning. And he continued to do this. In his current call, he does this. He handed it to his session. And his sessions looked at it, and horrified, they looked up and they said, "When do you have time to take care of yourself?" This is what Christ is calling on us to do. Not just to serve, but never pause to pray or rest. Christ doesn't call us here on Sunday mornings to worship, just to sit in the pews and let our minds wander to our to-do list for the day or the week. And that one, I will tell you, that one right there, no one is immune to, because I have found myself saying the Lord's Prayer with you. And since I grew up in a church that used trespasses instead of debts, if I'm not truly present in worship, if I'm thinking about the next thing that I have to do, or sometimes the next church that I have to get to, I find myself saying, "And forgive us our debts as we forgive those who debt against us." What? And immediately I'm brought back to the moment that we are in. That is not how Christ calls us to be. Christ calls us to be attentive in these cases. Faithfulness isn't found in choosing between Martha and Mary. It's found in making sure that we are truly attentive and following Christ in both. Because Christ meets us in both. The risen Christ is not only in the quiet room teaching Mary and the disciples, he is also in the kitchen with Martha, holding on to the work and responsibility and hospitality. So if you find yourself a Martha, overwhelmed, alone, and weary, Christ meets you there. Not to shame you for your work, but to gently call your attention back to him. And if you find yourself a Mary, still quiet, holding on to the hem of Christ's robe, Christ meets you there too. Not to keep you removed from the world, but to form you for the life he is calling you into. Because for all of us, both Martha and Mary, you and me, Christ calls us by name. He's not waiting for us to get it right before we get close to him. He is already present in the kitchen and in the quiet, in the work and in the stillness. And he is always inviting us to attend to him. So this week I want to challenge you to not ask yourself, am I being more like Martha or more like Mary today? But instead, where is Christ in this moment? Am I paying attention? Where is Christ in the work I have to do? And where is Christ in the moments I'm invited to stop? Because faithfulness isn't found in choosing. It's found in following Christ. So this week, may we learn to serve without losing sight of Christ. May we learn to be still long enough to receive him. And there, in both the busy and the present, may we encounter the risen Christ. May it ever be so. Amen.